CoinDesk recently published its list of projects to watch in 2023. On the list, a project I love to talk about. I think I spoke about it on Friday. Gridless. Gridless is extending power to rural communities in Africa through their innovative way of approaching Bitcoin mining in rural communities where the capital isn't available to set up microgrids. Gridless partners with an energy producer to co-locate a Bitcoin mining operation in your rural community. Whatever electricity isn't purchased by the community is then used for mining Bitcoin. Will, passing it off to you. I know I bring this company up every time we talk about mining. What do you think of this? Do you think we're going to see more companies like this pop up in areas outside of Africa, maybe areas in the States where the power supply is not quite there, to start to be less extractive or to be perceived as less extractive?
Yeah, and full disclosure, I do work for a Bitcoin mining company, and I have covered this as part of the work I do. So for mining media, we have definitely talked to Gridless because they are a fantastic story. They're really the poster boy that everyone wants in mining to be out there front and center, right? Because they are helping to electrify certain areas of East Africa that certainly do not have that ability. I've talked with Eric Herzman, who's the co-founder of Gridless, a few different times, including a podcast I had with him, and we just talked about how, in the US, we take for granted, or other Western countries, we take for granted the fact that we industrialized and electrified entire regions very quickly about 100 years ago, 50 years ago. And now we just don't really think about it. But there's other parts of the world that are still going through this process. And in order to electrify a whole region, you have to have a lot of capital pour into that place first. And that's what is happening with Bitcoin mining. So Bitcoin mining takes a lot of capital, but once you have it up and running, connect to the Bitcoin mining grid, you can get Bitcoin, and then you can sell Bitcoin into a global market. And then you can take that money and put it right back into rural development. And so that's what Gridless is doing. And I think a lot of Bitcoin miners, a la the New York Times story the other day, would love for this to be the point of conversation and not the extractive fossil fuel burning conversations that are typically brought up. Gridless is certainly one project to keep an eye on. There's a lot of stranded energy in Africa, let alone just energy in general. And I think this is something we're going to see unfold over the next 10 years. Wendy, I'll throw it up to you.
I absolutely love it. I love to see people do good things. I love to see the crypto industry, Bitcoin industry, prove people wrong. And I wish that mainstream media would kind of focus on these stories as well and bring the good and the bad of what Bitcoin can possibly do. Yes, Bitcoin does use a little bit of energy, but at the same time, what are we doing right now, guys? Are we leaving a carbon footprint, or is this 100% natural and whatnot? So I don't know. I'm just tired of all the FUD, but I understand why they're doing it. They got to make Bitcoin bad because they don't want people to become their own banks. But yep.
Yeah, energy capture, I think Bitcoin conversation, the mining conversation around, stranded natural gas, right? That's otherwise flared off and not really put to work. I think those are really interesting parts of the conversation, right? That are probably undertold, but also relatively small based on the entirety of the Bitcoin mining footprint, right? So I think things like crypto energy, some of those other things that are capturing gas specifically on site, and then, basically parking up a shipping container full of Bitcoin miners there to make that energy do something, I think is really interesting. And we've seen some experiments with ConocoPhillips, with other big energy companies. I believe ExxonMobil was involved in a pilot where there's been some early movement just yet, but early movement from some of these big energy firms that say, hey, this is a resource that we're legit wasting. We're just burning it to avoid additional emissions. Maybe we could burn it to power something that will be productive, and maybe that could help our bottom line and secure the Bitcoin network as a whole. So I think those are the ones that are really interesting beyond just the Gridless project. I think those are the ones that are really interesting in terms of advancing that conversation toward making, carbon, Bitcoin's carbon footprint a bit more healthy. But I'll throw it to Will for his thoughts on that.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. This is a minuscule part of the Bitcoin mining network right now. Most of it is built on interconnects on grids where there is just cheaper power for whatever reason. A lot of it is still fossil fuel based, probably moving towards a minority at this point, but not a small minority by any means. And these stories are great, but they're pretty small in terms of actually what's being used to power Bitcoin mining. But it doesn't matter because this is where things are going based on how expensive Bitcoin is and all that stuff. People are moving towards renewables, cheaper energy sources that are stranded. So Zach, give it to you as we close out.
I will just put in a very quick plug for the Projects to Watch project that this piece is a part of. team over at Consensus Magazine is highlighting some pretty interesting projects that you should dig on into. CoinDesk.com/projects2023.